All right, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger is warning that Vladimir Putin may use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Here to talk about that, retired four-star general, chairman for the Institute of the Study of War, Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane, my great friend and mentor. So, General Keane, you may have seen this and read all this stuff, but Kissinger speaking at the Financial Times conference, he said 6 months ago, I would not have thought Putin would start a war of this scale in Europe or anywhere else. And then he said Putin could deploy nuclear weapons. And he said that should be a subject of reflection for the U.S. That's Henry Kissinger. He went on to say, Jenna, we can't just accept it. It would open a new world of blackmail. What you think about that, Kissinger weighing in, sir?
Yeah, well, certainly. And I think where we are, frankly, when it comes to nuclear weapons, because they've been brandishing it, for almost a couple of months, the possible use of it, although I was pleasantly surprised that in the May 9th speech, there was no veiled threat about nuclear weapons, certainly no overt threat about it either, which was certainly good news by Vladimir Putin, that is. But what Henry Kissinger is talking about certainly is if you unpack this thing, and let's just assume he did use a tactical nuclear weapon in and around Ukraine someplace, and the United States and NATO did not respond to that, what Kissinger is saying is that he's going to do it again. He'll use it as a blackmail weapon to impose his will on occupying and taking control of a NATO country. So obviously, Putin needs to understand that if he's going to use a nuclear weapon, Larry, that this indeed is going to expand the war, and the consequences for him as a result of that would be really quite horrendous. I'm not suggesting that the response necessarily has to be in like kind to tackle a nuclear weapon. I believe the White House has a tiger team looking at all the options that would be presented to a president, and there's certainly a range of them. But just to give you a feel for what my thought is if something like that happened, and it would be horrendous, I would make certain before that happened that Mr. Putin understood clearly what is in the president's mind, and that is that we would go to war with you over that. That's for fact. Certainly, NATO, we want them to join us, but we can't guarantee that. It takes 30 votes to do that. But your army will be crushed inside of Ukraine, and at risk would be your Mediterranean and Black Sea fleets, as well as your 3 bases in Syria. And you just have to make sure that if someone takes that horrendous step, that there are going to be severe consequences. And certainly, Putin is an international pariah right now, and those states that are neutral, and 2 of them are very prominent. Israel certainly is one of them. India is the other, and many other states that are sort of neutral on the subject. That would likely change, and it would be crushing on him economically for his business community as well. So I go back to my premise: it's possible, but I think it's unlikely.
Well, I think I think what Henry Kissinger is getting to, he calls it the subject should be a matter of reflection for the United States. General Keane, I'm wondering sort of what should Biden say now to get ahead of that curve? In other words, Biden was too diplomatic. You and I talked about this endlessly 4, 5, 6 months ago when the Russian troops massed on the eastern Ukraine border. Perhaps we should have put the sanctions on first, maybe sold them the weapons first. We did it all, too late. Now we're catching up. Would it be a good idea to get ahead of this nuclear threat right away rather than to let it fester and catch up later?
Well, I would hope that the administration has taken that step and either spoke to Putin directly. If it doesn't want to take that phone call, they've been stiffing us in terms of any phone calls and the ability to negotiate. Then we send them a letter to that. I absolutely believe that. But listen, the Biden administration here, Larry, I give them some credit. They started out here with the old appeasement policy, limited amount of support for Ukraine, pushing Zelensky to make a deal. This is very early on. And now they're full into confrontation. And by that I mean is their policy has shifted. They're not going to say it shifted. They're not going to admit that. But it fundamentally has. And it happened because Ukraine, the success they've had in terms of their resistance, and when the atrocities became public worldwide, certainly that added significantly to the support from NATO, the EU, and the world writ large in condemning Russia. And now the administration's policy is openly they wanted to see the defeat of the Russian military inside of Ukraine. That is a complete shift from where we were in the beginning, and that is a confrontation policy. There's no doubt about it, and I'm hopeful that the Biden administration is communicating with Mr. Putin what the consequences would be if he decided to use a nuclear weapon, which would be horrendous for him, not only a terrible step for the world writ large.
And, General, you don't have to comment on this, but my hobby horse, the Italians seized Putin's yacht. They just took it, $700 million yacht. So I'm just going to say, save America, save Italy, save the Italian Navy. I got to give them credit. They did a wonderful thing. General Jack Keane, thank you, sir. We appreciate it very much.
Well, you were the first one to call for, Larry, you were the first one to call for seizing a yacht. So
I know. Putin,
hope you get a chance to get on it someday.
You know, Putin, right, he's a war criminal and a crook, and of course he got it just by putting his pennies away in a little tin box, but he's lost his boat. Anyway, General Keane, thank you very much.